Alright guys, excuse me. So far we have, created a, and, quick before I forget, I had a typo here, so I had HMTL. It needs to be HTML, and that's why it was like rendering weird. But regardless, yeah, just make sure you didn't commit my mistake. But once you have that, right now we're not really, sending some information in here. We're not really working with both the request and the response. So now we're gonna go ahead and mix these things up a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is create some space. We don't really need this console here. Excuse me. So we're gonna go ahead and create our constant, and then we're gonna create a URL where we will store the request URL that was sent to us. And then we're going to create an if statement. And in this if statement, we're going to check if URL is equal to the base, right? So if someone comes into our website, then we want to send something back to them. And by the website, I mean just like the root of the website. So I'll go ahead and copy this, paste it in here. I'm going to make some changes, right? So I'm going to check, instead of just sending hello to my server, we're going to generate a form. So we're going to do the code again. I would suggest open up and close the tags, so that way you don't make any mistakes. Form. And then we're going to go ahead and generate an input. Before we even do the input, let's go inside of the opening tag of the form. Let's do an action. And we want to go ahead and send a message. Message back to the user. And then in the method, we're going to go ahead and send it as a post. Now, post and get, we will get into these values a little bit later. Suffice to say, some of the more important ones are post, meaning when we send information to the server, and we get when we request information back. Okay? So in this instance, the form, we're going to redirect over to the message, or we're going to send over a message, and then we're going to be using the post method, so that way our server understands that we are sending information for it to capture. Okay? Now, in order to do so, we're going to go ahead and create an input field. We're going to create it as a type text, and then close that off, and then we're going to name it. And the name honestly isn't that important. We can name it whatever we want. We're just going to keep things consistent, so we're going to call it message. Save that. Here is going to bring it down. Again, you can go ahead and what's the word? You can go ahead and pause the video if you need time to go ahead and like look at this. But basically, we substituted the H1 hello for this line of code, right? So again, just make sure you have your opening, closing quotes, your opening, closing tags, and crossing your I's, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, right? So once we have this, let's go ahead and check it out now. Again, I am switching to Core 3000. Let me just put that there. Again, it should, in theory, work. Go ahead and node app.js. Bring over a browser. And in here, we're going to go localhost 3000. Hit enter. I get this little unceremonious little guy. So obviously the redirect here is working. So we're checking to see if the URL was the base. Go ahead and respond to this back, right? Then we're going to go ahead and ask, well, send back an information if I hit enter. Yep, there we go. So there are some mistakes in here that need to be addressed. For example, in here we want to go ahead and have a return to this, so that way once this gets rendered out, we exit out, so that way this rest of the information doesn't conflict with what we are telling the server. Let me just kill that over and save this, run this again. Now if we change this back over, we type something in here, there we go. So this part was the thing that was kind of like messing us up. It got conflicting instructions. By adding this return here, we're basically telling it don't render anything underneath it. Usually, by usually I mean never, you never want to have any other writes after you create an end, right? So that way, because again the browser is no longer listening, but these instructions still get sent over regardless, and there's just like floating in a limbo, so to speak. So we go ahead and say return, that way this exits out and this does not trigger, and our server keeps listening, right? And as you can see, once we send the action for the message, you see the URL now is being redirected over to message, right? So right now, let's start working on a way to actually, capture what the user is giving us instead of just like sending them back over here. So we're going to go ahead and create another constant here. So we're going to say constant. There's going to be a method. So we're going to capture the method, and we're going to grab the request dot method, store that in there. So that way we can check if the user is actually trying to post something. So we're going to say if URL equals / message, and where's my and? The method they used equals to post. Then we want to go ahead and like do something else, right? So in this instance, we also need to go back up, bring in the file system library. So we're going to do fs require fs. Ooh, my mouse. So that way we can. Right now we're just going to write some files. Honestly, it's grabbing the actual input of the user is going to be a little bit more complicated. So again, just showing you, a little bit, baby steps, so to speak, right? So if URL, and then we're going to do s dot write, and we're going to use file sync, and we'll explain some of the differences of this a little bit down the road. But right now, let's use the synchronous method, and then we're going to say generate a file called message.txt, and in there we're just going to have dummy data. So we're going to say dummy, so that way that gets generated. We're going to have a response back with a status code, and the status code is going to be 302, which is a redirection. And then we're going to go ahead and do a set header. And then since we are redirecting, we're going to say location, and separate this, and then we are where we are sending them over, so that's going to be back to the root. And again, we're going to do response.end with a return. Well, basically, instead of just having this rendered out, what we're doing is if the user, right now they don't really have an option, but if the user types in something, it's going to send them over. It's basically going to redirect them back to the main, but it's going to generate a txt file, okay? So let's have a look. Let me terminate that again. Have it run again. So let's head back to the root. So in here, we'll type something, hit enter. You see it sends us back, but we can see that it actually, this is what actually got executed, because we can see we have our file that's been generated here, message.txt, and we have our dummy data in there. Okay? Now, in the next lesson, we're actually going to grab the user inputs and actually have that be captured, right? Again, right now, we're kind of like taking baby steps towards it. You know, we're setting some groundwork so this way it's not as overwhelming. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next video.